we'll get started and wrap up this kind of mini series that I've been doing. Oh gosh, on what I call the perfect storm, but really what it is functional neurology kind of based. And again, I know many of you guys have gotten stuff from this because I've heard from you guys, a couple of you, about how, man, just so many things make sense. I've gotten messages from other people that watch these that aren't on live that are asking questions about their kiddos and teenagers with anxiety. And I mean, just putting all of these pieces of the puzzle together, it really can be kind of eye-opening, right? So, um, I hope this last little part will kind of do the same. And then hopefully we'll have some time for if you guys have questions, please. I love questions, even though I don't always have the answer. So I'm going to share my screen right away here. And this is where we stopped last time. All right, you guys should be able to see that now. Let me see if I can get this blown up. Okay, perfect. So we kind of ended last time. So if you're listening to this and didn't watch part two, I'd encourage you to do that because obviously a lot of good information. But at the end, I'm going to go over the same graph or chart that I ended with last time, which came from Harvard. The research, they have an entire kind of area at Harvard called the Center for the Developing Child. So there's just a lot of research that's going into all of this, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. Um, so what they say is the interaction of genes and experiences shape the developing brain. So I've said this before, but when a baby's born, the first 3 years of life are when most of the neurology, the brain development is happening. Now that continues to happen for a long, long time, for many years, but those first few years are just critical and crucial. And so what this kind of summary right here is yes, there's some genetic influence, there's genetics that come into play, but what do they mean by experiences? That is life and lifestyle. So the experiences of we talked about in part one, even when a mom or a dad is highly stressed out before they get pregnant, during pregnancy, if there's birth interventions, if there's something that happens during labor and delivery, if they're born healthy and none of that's the case, but then they grow up in a toxic environment where there's high stress and toxicity. And I mean, then you throw in the um, Ember. My dog is eating my Christmas tree right now. Gosh, does anybody else have that problem? Oh my gosh, get out of there. Okay, you're gonna hear me yelling at her. That's not cool. She's eating ornaments and trees. Anyway, um, then you throw in the all the things you guys know, the chemical exposure, the medications that maybe antibiotics and steroids, that just all the stuff, the food, the water, all of it. That's experiences. And all of that is shaping and has a huge influence on the developing nervous system, particularly the brain. So although genes provide the blueprint for the formation of these brain circuits and how this thing's forming, the circuits are reinforced by repeated use. And if there's insults into these circuits, meaning all of this lifestyle stuff we're talking about, then that can start hardwiring a little kid's brain. And again, I'll just use the example because there's many examples of being hardwired into the fight or flight response, right? So that is no bueno, right? That's setting a kiddo up for a lot of issues because like we've said before, the quote that I love is you cannot be in growth and protection at the same time. So whether that's a little kid that's struggling with developmental milestones, that can be physical, that can be mental, that can be emotional, that's going to bleed into kids with chronic immune and respiratory and all of these things. Like, I mean, asthma is off the charts. I mean, what kid doesn't have asthma these days? Like ear infections, chronic, all the chronic crud, not being able to kick the sick, their immune systems aren't working up and operating fully. So all of that comes into play. So then they say cognitive, emotional, and social capacities are inextricably intertwined through the life course and can be changed and altered. So this goes back to that graph I showed you last time, which we'll do again at the end, where even if something is hardwired, think about your house, wherever you live, right? So when they're building a house, there's a blueprint, right? And part of that blueprint is not only the walls, but it's the electrical part, right? So an electrician has to come in and has to start running wires, and then there's the circuit breaker, which is like the brain, right? The power source. Um, and so on that graph, it showed that you can change the nervous system just like you can change the wiring in a house. Would it be easier to change the wiring in a house and how that house functions? Okay, the efficiency of the functioning of that house when it's being built or after it's been built and sitting there for 20 years? Kind of obvious, right? You'd have to tear out walls, you'd have to tear out ceilings, you'd have to rewire, you'd have to do so much more work. And that's kind of the point. That's the analogy here. Is the younger someone is, the easier and less time it takes to change the nervous system and the brain. Okay? So that doesn't mean you can't do it when you're older, because you can, and they've shown that and that's been proven. It just takes more effort and more time. Toxic stress weakens the architecture of the developing brain, which can lead to lifelong problems in learning behavior and physical and mental health. Okay. So essentially, the motor neurosystem, so what I call the neuromotor system, that matters. That's such a huge part that's missing when people are having and bringing kiddos into this world. And that's like the most important thing to look at first. So, again, these developmental milestones, the neurology of what's going on in a kid's nervous system and brain is at the top of the list, the priority list. Okay, so Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a researcher, PhD, the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. So your nervous system literally controls every cell of your body, right? So do we talk a lot about how the gut impacts the brain? Yes, of course, because it does. But first and foremost, when a kid's developing, when a person's developing, it's like the nervous system is in control. And so you're perceiving the environment around you. So again, just as an example, what that means is, again, I'm just going to use an example of like a toxic home. Um, so if there's a lot of yelling, a lot of fighting, that's going to put a kiddo, even when they're babies, they can perceive that. If you think that's not true, I beg to differ. So they can perceive that, they feel that, and it starts to change their nervous system. So again, if that was a situation you were in, or maybe you had kids and you and a partner were those two people, again, I can relate to that. And it's not too late. There's no guilt, there's no shame, but it's like if you know all of this and know what can be done to start changing and shifting these things, that's the key. Okay. Not trying to go back in the past, and you can't change the past. So it is what it is. Okay. But if perception is altered or heightened, the brain gets confused, thus a bad decision or bad outputs. Okay. So we call this white noise. Basically, if a little kid is overstimulated by, again, overstimulated, it's not just toxicity like I'm using as an example, but overstimulated with all of the chemicals and all of the things in our culture now, right? Then it's bad input. It's just this negative input into the brain creates white noise in the brain. The brain gets confused, and then you're going to have bad output as well, which that is at certain times it can manifest as different things. Again, this is the bad output would be, okay, my immune system's now altered and not working properly. A lot of times this white noise we start seeing as the behavior issues. The little kids who can't sit still, who end up getting diagnosed with ADHD, the teenagers who eventually have anxiety and depression. Like, these are the things that this cycle has been going on for a very long time, more than likely. And all of this bad output is starting to come out in symptom patterns. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So this part of this altered perception, which we talked about the study last week about, spinal injury, specifically undiagnosed neck trauma, cervical spine trauma in a baby. It leads to altered function, right? So altered function. The brain, okay, so how does a neck injury have to do with brain development? Well, the brain is built from the bottom up. So basically, brain stem, like how it develops is it goes from the bottom up, and from the back forward. So the prefrontal cortex, the front side of your brain, a lot of important things happen there. That's the last thing to develop. Okay. So we're going to come back to that concept in a minute. But when the neuromotor system is altered, everything else is altered. So when that trauma happens, for example, in the upper cervical spine, or when the sympathetic fight or flight response is always activated in a kid, it starts to change everything else. Okay, because a lot of that is starting right up here, where that neuromotor system starts to develop. Perception is the first function in every key function. Neuromotor systems is thus of utmost importance. I've already said that. Basically, poor communication in. The brain doesn't know accurately what is going on, so it's trying to interpret all of this input coming in, this sensory input, and then so poor communication goes out. So that can be poor body control, poor body function, all of the other things that I've already said. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So the neuromotor system is number one on the list. So what is usually the most affected immediately or the soonest, I would say, and this isn't like textbook. This happens differently in different people. But how many of us have gut issues? How many kids have gut issues, right? The neuromotor pattern, what's going on up here? Again, go back to what I've talked about in the past, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve comes from your brain right down through your upper cervical spine, is definitely highly impacted by, say, something like a birth trauma. And then that is the nerve that controls your gut. Okay. So the gut starts having issues. Kids start developing really early on, food allergies, food sensitivities, all of those kind of things. Skin conditions start really early in life, like so many babies that have rashes and eczema and all that stuff, guys. Like this is where it starts. It's not a skin problem. Hear me. It's not a skin problem. So why are we just putting steroids on the skin of these kiddos? Like I had someone message me right before this. Ooh, okay. So it was a great message. The gentleman, it has nothing to do with kids, by the way, tangent, but it's just, I just love it. I just love it. I love getting messages like this because he's like, I really am thinking about working with you and want to work with you. But essentially, the moral of the message was, but is it going to work? Do I have to change my view of medicine? And his example was statins and cholesterol meds. So because he goes into his doctor and they want him on statins, and the doctor and he says, well, what if I don't want to do statins because I've been told and by someone like me that can cause more harm than good. But you guys, if you didn't watch the talk on statins and cholesterol earlier this summer, go back and watch that. But basically, the doctor said to this guy, well, if you don't want to take the medication, then you don't want to follow science. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. And so I nicely wrote a very nice message back, but basically debunked that entire statement. And I sent him links to all of the research that I could say. I'm like, basically, what I said was actually your physician is the one that's not keeping up on the research. Okay. So a statin is not necessarily, is it needed short term? Maybe, possibly. I told him I'm not anti medicine. Okay. Kids may need something like a skin treatment. I'm not saying they don't, but that is not the root cause of the issue. The statin is not going to fix the roots of why cholesterol is off the charts. There's gut issues. Guess what? The guy has gut issues. That's the main reason he wants to come to me. The liver, the detoxification processes. Your body is pumping out more cholesterol as a protective mechanism for the underlying things going on. Okay, so the same thing can apply to this situation. So kids with all of these issues, how many kids and babies are constipated? Okay, I've said this so many times, but I can't help it because pediatricians are notorious. Again, I love pediatricians. There's so many good ones out there, but yet most of them still say, well, if your kid goes 4, 5, 6, 7 days without pooping, that's normal. They'll grow out of it. That is not normal. That is not normal. That is not normal. And that is not doing anything good for them. That's a toxic overload inside their gut. Okay. They need to be pooping multiple times a day to clear junk out. Right. Okay. So gut issues are just a dime a dozen. And The gut is complicated, as a lot of you guys know. I mean, there could be dysbiosis, there could be leaky gut syndrome in a baby and a kid. That's possible. But there also is this neuromotor system piece. And I've said this before, you guys will hear me repeat this, but like when I was more doing like physical medicine and functional neurology, I could not tell you how often a parent brought a baby or a kid, toddler in that has been constipated for a week or two, literally not gone poop, and I adjust the spine, usually the TL junction or the lumbar spine. Okay, and they poop before they walk out of the door, like blowouts. We had to have diapers and like rags on standby because these kids, it's just they're waiting. But the neurology and the spine has such a critical role in that oftentimes. Okay. And that can actually happen in adults too, with constipation, but usually it's a lot more complicated than a baby. Okay. So neuromotor, gut function, then comes the immune function. We all should know that by now because 80, 70%, 80% of your immune system lives in your gut. So that's obviously going to get a big old strike against it. Then these problems start leading into some of these other things, going more into the brain, speech development in some kids, the socialization, the behavior, um, the emotional regulation, the tantrums, the not sleeping at night, crying all the time, being fussy as a baby, but then as a kid, not being able to behave in school and pay attention. These are all like this is such a you look at 90+% of the time when I'm working with kids, it is like check the boxes as you go. It is literally this pattern almost every single time. Okay. So it's just a gap in our evaluation and management system in traditional medicine that we're just missing. Okay. And again, going back to last week's talk with the neuromotor system, birth traumas, and all those kind of things, that can be kind of one of the initiators to some of this. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it oftentimes is. So you remember we looked at this chart last time, how important the upper cervical spine is. It's just so much more than just ligaments and bones and joints. Okay. It's a living, this is a quote by Dr. Tony Ebel. He's a mentor of mine up in Chicagoland. It's a living, breathing neurological communication superhighway that is vitally important to brain, to body, and back again. Communication, coordination, and control of every other tissue, cell, and system of biological and physiological systems. Okay, so it's so much more complicated than just saying I have neck pain, I have back pain, I'm stiff, all of those kind of things. Those are true. Those are physical manifestation symptoms, but those physical symptoms in a lot of us are struggling with these kind of things, right? They likely are contributing in some way to what's going on even in your organ systems. So a fancy term, the medical term would be somatovisceral responses. Okay, the somatic system is your musculoskeletal system. So think your spine. Visceral means organ. There are what are called somatovisceral responses. Okay, that means if there's a problem in the spine and a joint in the joints aren't just joints. There's neurology, there's receptors, there's things going on inside those joints that then can disrupt the nerve pathways to the organs of that part of from that where that those nerves come from the spine. So it can cause an organ issue. Okay, it can cause disruption, and then vice versa. Okay, there's also something called viscerosomatic responses. You guys will know what I'm talking about. Here's an example. Has anybody ever known anybody that has like, usually it's right kind of scapular, like shoulder pain, like upper trap, kind of right sided shoulder blade pain? And they may have gotten all the massages and all the adjustments and done all the stretches, and it doesn't change. And guess what it ends up being? A gallbladder attack. That's a viscerosomatic response. The gallbladder, gallstones, something's going on, an infection is causing shoulder pain. Now, the gallbladder's way down here, the shoulder's clear up here. How does that happen? That's the complexity of this. Okay. And I could go on and on and on with different examples, but that's a very common one. Okay, so viscerosomatic and somatovisceral responses. So this complex superhighway of communication, and again, all of it leads right into the brain too. So we call this the D's of dysfunction. There's actually 10 of them. I'm not going to go over all those 10 and bore you to death, but because this is really getting science-y, but I know some of you guys like this, but I'm going to go over a few of them here. So dyskinesia is basically abnormal alignment and movement. So this would be like a body worker, like a massage therapist, a physical therapist, a chiropractor would look at your alignment, look at movement, and try to correct some of that. And this is one of the other reasons why I encourage you guys, and I've given all of you like so many resources on physical, how to take care of your body physically, because it is an important part. And here's one of the reasons why. 50 to 60% of sensory input going into your brain from your body comes from the spine. Okay, so there's sensory input from your organs, from your gut, for example, but 50 to 60% is coming from your spine alone. A third of that is literally just coming from the upper cervical regions, the very top of your neck. So then think back to the birth trauma discussion. When 99 of 100 of these little babies that they studied had some sort of birth trauma to their spine and most commonly upper cervical, can you start to see all this bad input is already going into the brain? It's changing the neurology of what's going on. Number two is called disafferentation. This is the abnormal sensory input, the altered perception. So it goes right along with this dyskinesia. Now you're getting this sensory input from the spine into the brain, and the brain's trying to figure out what to do with it. Number three is called dysautonomia. This one you guys should recognize because we talk about it. This is an imbalance in the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, the gas versus brake, right? So fight or flight, sympathetic, gas pedal is screaming. It's on. It's pedal to the metal in so many of us. And I'm not talking about just kids. Okay, as you guys as all as adults, how many of us just are stressed? Or maybe you're not now, but maybe you went through years of stressful jobs, stressful careers, family stuff, relationship stuff, all the stuff. Okay, if you were slamming the gas pedal for years and years and years, you may not be stressed out now, because I do hear this a lot from some of you guys, is I'm not stressed out now, but guess what? Your nervous system is already programmed to be stressed, even if you feel it or not. So you have to change that in order to start healing under the surface. Okay. Number four is dysfunction. This is the interference of optimal function of other key systems. So again, these things, these top three, one, two, and three, then start leading to number four over time. It may not be immediate. It's an accumulation over time. You start to get dysfunction in other systems of the body, the gut, the liver, the endocrine system, your hormones start going crazy. All of these systems are interlinked and interconnected. Okay. When I say accumulate over time, you guys, I think most of you guys understand that because I've used this example too. Our bodies, oh my gosh, they're amazingly built and designed to be susceptible and resilient. So an example of this would be if you get and again, I'm going to use traditional medicine because it's such an amazing the technology we have. But if you get an X-ray, X-rays this day are, I mean, digital X-rays are phenomenal, the detail they see. But did you know that you can still have 50 to 60% of bone loss before an X-ray can even detect it? Right? So your body, like, and imaging isn't quite up to. So DEXA scans obviously can catch it a lot sooner. But just your body is able to compensate and is resilient to these things where you may not even have any symptoms of something until boom, one day you wake up. Another example, so that was kind of a poor example of that, but like another example that I would hear all the time is, one day I woke up and my fingers were tingly. Okay, did carpal tunnel just happen overnight? Did a disc herniation or a disc degeneration just in your neck just happen overnight, causing that tingling? No, that's been going on for a long time, but your body's compensated and been resilient enough to deal with it until it can't anymore. Gut issues. Okay, I wake up one day and all of a sudden, man, I just have all this bloating, this constipation, this kind of came out of nowhere because it's kind of a slow onset. That's been going on for a long time. your body's just been handling it. And now it's finally getting to the point where the threshold is reached. And it's like throwing up its hands and it's like symptoms. Okay. So symptoms are the worst way to know how you are actually functioning. Have you guys heard me say that before? Symptoms, whether it be musculoskeletal, whether it be organ systems, symptoms are the worst way. And this is where the gap is again in traditional medicine. Our medical system is designed to diagnose disease, right? It's designed to diagnose disease. So this is where things are missed. This is why we run labs and we find things that are like, oh my gosh, why wasn't I ever told this? Why didn't anybody ever look at this? Okay. Every day, you guys all know because it's been a lot of you on this call that we've discovered things with that sometimes can be like relieving, frustrating, maddening, all at the same time. I get it. I hear this every day because it's so true. Because it's like my scans were all normal, my blood work has been all normal. They told me, blah blah, blah. And I know some of you guys can relate to this, and it's just not a deeper dive. Okay. And again, we're talking about the nervous system today, but it all interconnects. And again, I'm going on tangents. But number 5, dyskinesis is a funny word. This is an abnormal energy expenditure and output. Okay. So all of the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 leads to number 5. Dysautonomia, we've covered that so much in the past. Again, I'm going to just kind of throw this up on the screen, see if there's anything that I haven't said here real quick. So the autonomic nervous system controls and modulates every single cell, tissue, and organ in the body. Therefore, when dysautonomia takes root, it can cause a multitude of symptoms and various health conditions. Basically, everything we've talked about, everything you guys are struggling with. There's some sort of a neurological connection to everything, okay? Then we throw in autoimmune challenges, immune system issues, digestive system challenges, etc. More advanced neuroscience is showing that dysautonomia is not just heart, lung. So dysautonomia used to be just thought of as heart, lung, and digestive system issues. But symptoms are what we're now seeing. And this is actually years ago that this talk, I actually first put this together. So the research is even more so now, but can also encompass things like mental and emotional health challenges, immune suppression and autoimmune conditions, focus and behavioral challenges, of course, chronic exhaustion and fatigue, dizziness, fainting, vertigo, anxiety, depression. And what causes dysautonomia? Stress, everything. The 3 T's of stress: toxic stress, which is chemical stress, physical stress, trauma, and then, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Somebody help me. Quiz time. The 3 T's: toxins, traumas, and thoughts, emotional stress, right? So those are the 3 T's of stress. The perfect storm algorithm. Okay, so kind of think about this in your life. Think about this for kiddos that you have. How much stress has there been? Okay, we're not going to put numbers to this, but this could be an equation. Literally, we used to do this. I used to do this when I was trying to figure out, like, using the Harvard guidelines. It's like, how long is it going to take me? If a parent brings in a kid to my office and they're like, they have all these issues, and we go through a thorough history. What I tried to do was I tried to be as good as I can saying, okay, it's going to take 6 months. It's going to take a year. It's going to take 2 years. And there's this algorithm. So, because how much stress has there been? How much? Okay. When did the stress occur? Did it start right away in life? Was there birth trauma? Was there a hard labor? Was there hard delivery? Was there XYZ? All the things. You guys remember the health history that you filled out for me? So you remember there was a lot of questions about when you were born, and some of you leave them blank because you have no idea, right? Because it was too long ago, right? There's a reason why I ask those questions, even though you're an adult. Because if you were formula fed versus breastfed, that matters. Your gut microbiome from day one already was altered and in compromise if you didn't get breast milk. Was there birth trauma? You obviously know the answer to that. Why is that important? Because I've talked about that ad nauseum now. So anyway, all of those questions matter. When did the stress occur? That's going to kind of equal how much care and for how long to help restore this neurological balance. And again, a big part of this also is, what are you going to do on your own? Are you someone who's going to depend on me to fix you, which never really goes that well, Because you need to take an active role in your care, active role in your kiddos' care. What are you going to do to create a better environment? What are you going to do to help them sleep better at night? What are you going to do to help them have better nutrition? What are you going to do to help calm their nervous system? Routines and habits, right? These are all things that matter. The earlier the stress, the more of it, and the longer it has been there are all factors in how deeply rooted these issues will be. Okay, so again, that hardwiring of the nervous system. Teenagers, anxiety, stress, and depression. Holy moly, right? I know all you guys know this. Every one of us knows young adults, and probably a lot of us, anxiety, stress, and depression. The rates of anxiety in teens has already surpassed adults and is at 1 out of 3. I wouldn't be surprised if that's an out of date stat. It might be 50% now. Okay, then they rose again dramatically again during COVID related lockdowns. That didn't help anything. That just didn't help anything. But anyway, burnout, stressed out, anxious, ADHD adults. Okay. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting 40 million. That's an old stat. It's way more than that now. 18.1%. That's an old stat. It's more than that now. It's a lot. It's a lot of people. Here's some signs, if you don't know this, of high functioning anxiety in older kids and adults. So, on the outside, people that probably have had this pattern going on since they were really little, this is what they look like. And guess what? I'm going to raise my hand here because this was me. Hardworking, detail oriented, high achieving, ambitious, perfectionist, organized, well prepared, calm, does well under pressure. You couldn't write a better script for me. Oh my gosh, that was totally me. No one ever told me any of this stuff. And then I told you guys I had like a version of sensory processing too, right? Like tags on my shirts just drove me nuts. If my socks had a wrinkle in them, drove me nuts. This is not things that anybody was looking at back then. On the inside, what's happening is you're overthinking and you're probably wound up. You're overwhelmed but exhausted. You're high energy maybe, but exhausted at the same time. You're getting burnout. You're easily fatigued. Maybe there's sleep issues, chronic tension. Like I need to crack my back or crack my neck all the time. Maybe you have, and not all of these are true, but maybe you have trouble saying no to things. Maybe you feel like you need to be busy. That, oh my gosh, I still to this day have a hard time relaxing. It's like if I just relax, I start feeling like I need to be doing something. Anybody else relate to that? Okay, this is a nervous system neurological thing. We need to intentionally calm our brain, calm our mind. Maybe you have unrealistic expectations. Maybe you're a people pleaser, a feel of fear of failure, and you have a lot of self-doubt. So, if this is hitting with you, it's not going to hit with all you guys, but there's some high functioning anxiety going on potentially. Chemical imbalance, question mark. Is this just a chemical imbalance? So if someone has anxiety, if someone has depression, if someone has ADHD, is it just a chemical imbalance? I don't think that's wrong, but it's incomplete. So putting a kid or an adult even on medications that's going to help alter or reform or balance this chemical situation in our brains, great, fine, sure, but is that really the complete equation? Okay, so I hope you guys know the answer to that based on everything that I've presented to you. The answer is no. So balancing things like dopamine and serotonin, all these other neurotransmitters that some of these medications are working on, again, great, fine. Sometimes people need to do that for a short term, but they really need to dive in and figure out what's going on at the source. Or did the neurological imbalance come first? And that's what I would argue is yes. So we need to look deeper at the nervous system and what's going on and how to figure that out. Okay. And then obviously there's gut and so many other blah blah blah. So because the gut, I mean neurotransmitters, some of you guys know this. Dopamine, serotonin, 95% of serotonin is made by gut bacteria. 50% of GABA, a high amount of dopamine. I mean these neurotransmitters are not just brain chemicals. Okay? They're made elsewhere. So if there's dysfunction elsewhere, it's going to affect brain. Okay? All right, so this is the chart I showed you guys last week. So kind of wrap this all up, like kind of to refresh your memory. So the blue line is the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. So how easy is it to change the neurology, the nervous system of a little kid, baby, 2 years old, 4 years old? You guys can see that line. It starts to descend and go down pretty drastically, pretty quick. Okay, but those first 3 years of life, if I would draw a line straight up, right about here where my little mouse is at, that's 3 years old. Okay, there's a huge potential for change, and the orange line is the amount of effort such change requires. So again, that 0 to 3 years, 4 years, and actually that stays consistent till about 10, 12, 13 years old. Okay. So pretty fascinating. And this, again, this comes from Harvard research on the developing child. So you can change this stuff. Okay, but again, even if you look at the right side of the chart, you can still change as a 70, 80, 90-year-old person. It's just going to require more patience, more discipline, more time. And there is some aspect of it that's, this is reality. This isn't like, I'm not God and I'm not Jesus, and no medical doctor, no any kind of doctor plays that role. So there is some reality to the stress and the abuse and the trauma that we've put our bodies through for our entire lives. By the time we're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, I mean, there's some damage that's been done that potentially is just going to be there, but that does not mean you cannot improve and your quality of life can just be so much better, so much better. So hopefully you guys understand that, got that. So questions. Good, I ended early. Yay. What did that bring up for you guys? Anything? What did you learn? What hit home with you?
So I have a question about knowing adults that have been diagnosed with ADHD or some kind of like even psychosis, but they've been put on medication to alter their dopamine. At some point, just by changing their gut balance, do you think they'd be able to start making their own or enough dopamine, or do you think they've been altered for so long that
Great.
it just
Yeah, great question. I think again, there's not a great answer for that because I don't know of any like hard evidence. I can say intuitively and like clinically, like anecdotally speaking, kind of like that chart just showed, I think there's always a chance and potential for the body to heal, right? The depth of it, how long have they been on the medications?
yeah.
Is some of that completely shut down? That's a question. But can the body continue? Can the body start producing? I mean, that's for sure a yes. Because like I said, the bacteria in your gut produces a lot of these things. Okay. So if there was some sort of imbalance, and again, it's a complex thing.
Mhm.
And I would never say the gut is the only thing either. I'm a big gut guy, but again, I'm running on some patients. I'm trying to think of if any of you guys in here, I don't think so, but um, so many of you, I start with the gut because of the importance of it and because it trickles down with everything else. But are there other systems of the body that we need to look at? So I've run brain panels on people, like neurotransmitter panels, to look at deeper level neurology stuff. I've run, obviously hormones, endocrine system function, trying to think, because then you branch out into, okay, is there genetics? We've talked a lot about genetics and genetic panels. Then you branch into, because genetics can even tie into nutrition, right? So again, we talked about that a few weeks ago, how even your genetic profile can determine how you metabolize food. I've given you my example is I'm not a good fat metabolizer, so I'm never going to do good on ketogenic, right? I probably would not do well on carnivore either. Some people do fantastic on that. Okay, but then there's also what I was going to say is heavy metal toxicities. So again, looking at how much heavy metal, by doing those kind of labs. Mold. Whew, it's been a while since we talked about mold, but I did a series on mold a while, but maybe earlier this spring or maybe it was last year. I don't even remember. But I don't know if they'll be listening to this, but I have a new patient who they know that they had mold in their house for 2 to 3 years and they lived with it before it was mitigated. And that was a couple years ago. It's not done. Like you can get rid of the mold in your house, but those mycotoxins, those poisons that are in your body do not just leave. And not only do some of their half-lives, like they might stay in your body for a long time, but then the consequences of what they've done also. So again, going back to, so then we need to look at liver function. Is the liver detoxifying at high levels? There's just so many steps. And this is where I know some of you guys have been working with me for, gosh, a long time, a year. But I think this is a lifelong deal. Not saying you have to work with me for a lifetime, but honestly, in some sort of way, I think it's necessary. I've told you guys this, like doing an annual gut stool sample, for example, because things change. We're exposed to things that we may not even know. Okay, so if you want to really stay on top of things, you continue to evolve and look at things at a deeper level. That I kind of went on a couple different than from what your question was, but I think there's always ability to change. Any other thoughts on this? Questions come up? All right, all right, all right. So, what do you do with this? Okay, so again, a lot of you guys know that this is kind of like, man, this made so much sense with my story, but I will just go right back to that last slide, the Harvard study on kids. Um, this is something that is just a huge passion of mine. So if you guys know families where their young ones are struggling, sooner the better. Okay, sooner the better. Um, and that can be again, if you guys are at the holidays and you're like hearing them talk about how their kids always constipated, maybe you should bring this up around the table, around Christmas dinner. I do at my family outings. They just kind of expect it at this point. Hey, how are your bowel movements as we're eating Christmas dinner? I'm just kidding, but not really. Like, start bringing up these conversations with people because if they're like, "Oh yeah, my kid, gosh, they go 4, 5, 6 days before they have a bowel movement," or "Gosh, they're not sleeping well," or blah blah blah. All these things, you guys kind of know what to listen for and get them the help they need. You can start kind of educating people in this way too. So, all right. Okay, I don't know what the next thing I'm going to be talking about. I haven't thought that far forward yet. So if you guys have topics that I haven't covered that you want me to do here before the holidays come up, let me know. You can chat message me. Otherwise, I'll come up with something. I always do. And everybody have, gosh, what is it? December 3rd. So Janine, happy Christmas. Merry Christmas up there in the Dakotas. And Denise, have fun with that 2 feet of snow. And all of you Nebraska people, I
Thank you.
guess, we got more ice than snow now. So be careful. And God bless you guys. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, you too.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.